we are seeing the worst downturn in advertising this year because of the war. And it's going to not be felt that much in Q2, but it's going to be felt really badly in Q3 and Q4. And broadcasters are feeling the brunt of it really badly.
We're 3 weeks out from the APOS conference in Bali, and we've turned our attention to the issues that are top of mind in C-suites around Asia.
Yes, indeed, we have. And we're joined this week by a man who is very good at setting the agenda for the Asian film industry, Vivek Couto, who is Executive Director of Media Partners Asia. Vivek, welcome to The Point.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on To The Point. It's great to be with you and Janine today and to sift through APOS and also what's discussing at the top of your busy minds as well.
We were just chatting about the center of gravity having shifted. Tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting time at APOS, Janine, because you were there at the very first APOS, and I think Patrick's been there and many others since then. 16 years of APOS, but the way I look at it, the first 6 years we were still in that pay TV ecosystem and also theatrical ecosystem. And since 2016, when Netflix launched at APOS, with Reed Hastings and Ted Sarandos there, they're now celebrating 10 years, obviously, and they will celebrate it at APOS this year. There's been so much change and so much has happened in a very compressed time frame in terms of mergers and acquisitions, the pandemic, various new formats. And to be honest with you, I feel the gravity in the region and globally, but definitely in the region, has shifted from a lot of the companies that we tend to look at in the past who make content, who are still part of APOS, still incredibly important voices, to the big platforms now that aggregate all the attention. And I think that's really important shift. And the second important shift is now to the AI models that are going to generate, localize, and personalize the next wave of experiences, content, and formats. And today, and we have these companies at APOS, but you look at YouTube, which is now, if it was a standalone Alphabet asset, it isn't, but if it is standalone Alphabet asset, it's valued by analysts at $600 billion. ByteDance, as Patrick knows, trades around that range in the private market. Netflix is generally worth now more than Paramount, Disney, Warner Brothers, and Sony Entertainment, and NBCU Entertainment put together. So that's the shift of gravity. And our agenda this year is sort of anchored by, I think, three really interesting companies. One is obviously Google, who's on with Andy Serkis. The second is ByteDance, who are very much present there with the event and showcasing, talking to people about Seedance, and of course Kling AI, and they anchor the agenda. And they're working with a lot of players in Asia, all three of them, and particularly ByteDance and Kling, but they're working with a lot of companies on the production side, on the creative workflow side, on creative, on the creative economy, with different creators. So I think that is really, really interesting, and how those conversations permeate the event and what people share and what are the insights they share are going to be really, really important. And of course, a lot of people from the streaming side are going to preview the architects of the platform side, different from content, more on experience, whether you're GeoStar or iQIYI or MTech or even players like Unext and ABS-CBN are going to look at what are they doing in terms of personalization, productization, search, discovery, all of that stuff to make their products super incredible, for the next wave.
I'm going to jump in very quickly and ask you a very fun follow-up question. You mentioned Google plus Andy Serkis in the same breath. Andy Serkis, of course, is known as a fabulous actor from Lord of the Rings. He's also a director and producer. Explain the Google connection and how that will relate to some of our listeners.
Well, I think obviously Andy Serkis is a testament to human ingenuity, and I think all of that is still going to be preserved in the Google world, at least the way they're working with Hollywood at the moment, Patrick, including a lot of other people, including Joshua, who's on with Andy Serkis. So I think the way Google sees it is, how do you work with the best cinematic talent to produce cinema-grade premium content, preserving the human voice, humans in production, but working with the best tools. And I think Andy's a testament really to more on the immersive experiences side and animation and production and really optimizing the experience for customers rather than taking tons of human beings out of the process. So I think that's the Google focus. What's intriguing about some of the other players in which they're working with is really how do you work with broadcasters, streamers, movie producers in Asia to be more efficient, to be blunt. We are seeing the worst downturn in advertising this year because of the war, and it's going to not be felt that much in Q2, but it's going to be felt really badly in Q3 and Q4. And broadcasters are feeling the brunt of it really badly. So in order for those players to compete, and I know Janine's written about ABS-CBN recently, it's all about how do you optimize revenues with your great IP and all the IP you produce, but how do you really solve for all the technology and product and engineering issues that you have, and also how do you start training your library on with some of these tools, producing new content with some of these tools. And obviously the best fit for some of that is through microdramas, whether it's through AI-based localization or AI-based content. And we're seeing a lot of that, obviously, in that category, in that new format.
You've got AI in just about every section of your agenda for the 3 days of APOS. The theme, I believe, is the AI multiverse, multimodal models in the future of entertainment. Are people actually using it in the way that you'd expect? Or is it still all talking at the moment?
Look, I think AI is a generational technology and it's a generational shift. Don't ask me, ask Reed Hastings what he said 3 weeks ago, that AI is going to fundamentally change whatever Netflix and Warner and Disney do and whatever YouTube and TikTok do. And whoever uses that tool better is going to come out on top because it reimagines everything in the technology. And I think we've only just started seeing the beginning of it. Thomas Tull's viewpoint is that, it's great to use these tools, but the whole, all of these companies need to be fully integrated with AI right from start to finish. And there are some people taking that quite literally by doing that right across the workflows, right to everything we produce. So I think people have only started using it to answer your point, Patrick. No one's sort of convincingly produced long form content using fully AI in terms of storytelling, actors and actresses and all of that stuff. We're seeing much better impact on it, I would say, on product, on technology, on user experience, on advertising, on marketing, some companies even sales. But we're yet to see the human ingenuity part, basically content creation, being replaced by AI. It's more of a tool at that point in sides. But it is reframing reframing the narrative for these companies, and it is being used a lot more by Asian companies to produce convincing results. And it's also, to be frank, where a lot of investor money is going after, right? So, we've seen a resurgence of investor interest around APOS that we haven't seen since, I would say, 5-6 years since the sort of pay TV streaming shift, because there's only a few streaming platforms you're going to invest in, right? But I think what we're seeing now is that a lot of people are interested in companies that are focused on AI and focused for new formats. Could be microdramas, to Janine's point, could be sports as well, could be, new fandom platforms, new niche platforms. There's a lot of interest in how this technology is being applied.
I'm looking at the agenda, and I think you pretty much set that in stone now with the speakers and the talking points, and it just feels like things are pulling in different directions. So one of the things you said was there's an incredible focus on technology, but outside of that, and from the consumer experience, there's, on one hand, there's these big, expensive experiences, because that's what consumers expect. Is a more like 360 interaction with the IP that they already know and love. And the other one's about short, cheap, mobile first content. how are you going to bridge that?
I think there is that tension in the agenda, for sure. It's very much there, Janine. And there are companies that have that. I mean, look, the next few years is also all about differentiation and people who make even more authentic content that lives on big screens, lives on connected TV, lives on small screens, and our real life experiences, not just live sports, but fantastic content with great IP that also drives, consumer products, experiences, all of that stuff are going to still have a very, very, very strong proposition. At the same time, in Asia, it has to be said, people who sort of appeal to this growing consumer class that, want short, snackable, serialized content, which, some you could call it the microdrama formats. That's going to be very interesting because that growing consumer class who lives on e-commerce today or lives on gaming today, some people call it the shoppy consumer class in Southeast Asia. That stuff lives from microdrama content, and that consuming class is growing and growing and growing. Not many people have spotted this, but a week ago, Netflix did its first mid-form content. Check it out in Mexico. And that was interesting. I mean, it's an experiment, right? And we'll see what's happened. Most of this is all experimental so far from the premium platforms, right? Apart from maybe MX Player, which is going a little bit more into it, and which is just merged with Amazon in India. But GeoStar has launched its microdrama platform. It's just the start. Videos licensing, viewers licensing, various players are dabbling. But the point is there is huge demand and growing demand for the content. It's just a question of the monetization models outside of, I guess, the United States, China and Japan in those sense. But there is that tension for sure. And there's also the other tension is how do you explore new revenue streams? Because what's happened, and I don't want to give away the presentation, is it's effectively a displacement tool, right? In a sense, in certain markets, consumer spending on entertainment is grown. In certain markets, consumer entertainment is flat. But in all markets, streaming share has grown substantially, right? For obvious reasons, with Netflix driving that. In certain markets, as being big local players like India, Indonesia, Japan. But that's what's happened. And then on the advertising side, very interestingly, which is something we will showcase with TikTok, and I'll talk about this in a minute, there is that tension. People will wonder, why are we having TikTok with two creators early in the morning? But that's because we don't want to shock the room, but we want to hold the audience in the room, slap them around, or rephrase that, hold the audience in the room, shake them up and show them what's happening. Because if you look at the spend on retail media, it's growing 3 times of what is happening even in streaming advertising. Netflix is aware of this. GeoStar is aware of this. And that business is just through the roof. If you look at retail media in India, between Amazon ads, the marketplaces, the other e-commerce vehicles that have come in, it's already a $4 billion market in India, right? In 3 or 4 years' times. And those e-commerce players, whether they're in India or Japan and Korea, are not going into long-form content. They all want to go into microdramas. Brands want to play in the microdrama side. That's something else we're highlighting, and hence the TikTok panel with the 2 creators, to show what some people might regard as inane creators, how they're monetizing, how they're creating, and how they're engaging with advertisers and consumers.
What do you see where does long form and film fit into this? I mean, it's just it seems like it's a pretty bleak space.
No, I think long form content is alive and well, but I think the key question is, and you guys write about this a lot, this generational divide of new customers coming in that aren't necessarily engaging as it once were. I mean, we've got a big dive, Janine, on all our favorite platforms, the streaming platforms, on what's making them work and tick. And all of them are finding a good niche with certain content. And the point is, it's not that it's not doing well. Streaming in this region outside of, I guess, India and China went through a bit of a big correction phase, as you guys well know and have written about, in 23. But it grew in 24, it doubled in 25, and it's still growing in 26. But the issue is YouTube and TikTok is growing 3 times faster. right? That's the issue, right? And so I think, what we're seeing, Janine, is the demand for a lot of local content, whether it's in India from the South, particularly, right? And also the movies and series is big. And a lot of that content is also starting to travel on Netflix and Amazon, maybe in the future with Geo Hotstar as it expands. Then you see that obviously in Korea. But what happened in Korea, which is slightly more nuanced, is when we started tracking Korean content, that was the flavor. That was the only premium grade content arguably available on streaming in Southeast Asia, thanks to Netflix and then various other platforms. Now other people have caught up. Video and to some extent Netflix has done an outstanding job in Indonesia. So it's neck and neck in Indonesia. Thai content is doing very well. Chinese content is starting to do very well. And Netflix has got a Chinese strategy. Disney's importing that. So I think I'm not a naysayer on those forms of content. I think the argument is slightly less pronounced, is more on where does Hollywood find its role in the region, which is a different argument and more nuanced. I think there's still a lot of focus on long form content to drive engagement and focus. I think the issue is more around local entertainment on television versus this whole microdrama stuff that's growing, right? Because free-to-air content, whether it's in or sort of pay TV mass content in India or free-to-air content in Southeast Asia or even free-to-air content in Japan was a staple. And now we're seeing more and more desire and more attention driven. It started in China. It's happening in the US, driven by this vertical and the microdrama content demand, which I can talk about more in the future because I think that's going through an interesting phase as well. And that seems to be the big pull right now for a lot of people and a lot of investments going forward.
I was reading the notes you sent out to your clients earlier this week, and you have one of your themes is the return of the big screen. I misread that. I thought you were talking about theatrical and multiplexes, but in fact you were talking about connected TV, as in a large screen in people's living room. Well, the large screen in people's living room looks very different in Tokyo from maybe Manila. How do we have a conversation about connected TV when the infrastructure gap is so big?
Yes, true, but it's growing. And that's another big thing to grow on. And that's another thing that Reed Hastings saw many, many, many years ago. As the growth of fiber broadband grows and the growth of connected TV grows, there's more and more watch time being spent on these big streaming platforms. I don't know about fast. I think it's a bit of a mirage in Asia, maybe outside of Australia and Japan. But the thing is, for the big screen consumption, it's growing, Patrick, and it's here to stay. I think you're right. There are some infrastructure connectivity hurdles in places like Philippines and Indonesia. There has to be a lot more fiber broadband growth. I agree. Thailand is ahead. Malaysia and Singapore are ahead, and obviously Japan, Korea, and now India are ahead. But what we're seeing, Patrick, is there was more viewership on connected TV than traditional TV of the IPL this year in India, right? Connected TV is massively growing in India. And Geo Hotstar, because of sports, maybe not on entertainment, but because of sports, can charge, significantly higher CPMs on it. Netflix and Amazon are very happy because they get a big addressable market for their content. So we're seeing India jump up on that level. The same thing we're seeing Japan jump up. CTV has been a big theme in Japan. TiVo has benefited. Amazon's benefiting now with their Prime Video ad side. And Netflix is happy, right? Because of the World WBC. It was a huge moment for them. So CTV is actually quite a big deal for us on how people monetize it and sort of develop strategies, but also to both your points from a programming side, both Netflix at a regional level and people like GeoStar are obsessed now with co-viewing and family level viewing, right? Because when you get to CTV, you need something that everyone can join in, everyone can watch it. What kind of family-based programming, apart from sports, can you do? If you saw the WBC numbers, slightly different from AMP numbers. AMP just looked at account levels, but Netflix was very careful to, say they were doing a lot of co-viewing, extrapolations across different viewers, probably to boost up their numbers and look good to the advertisers. But the thing is, there is an obsession with that, right? Because during the pandemic, as you all know, and as the growth of streaming, it was incredibly democratized, incredibly personalized and individual, right? Because you all went from big household viewing to individual usage. Now it's almost coming back to that household level. So it will be interesting how family, kids, variety, reality programming comes back as a result.
What does this do to mobile? The mobile engagement.
Oh, mobile's all about microdramas. Mobile's all about TikTok, right? I mean, I haven't seen many people who are watching microdramas on the big screen yet, but it's all about that. It's all about what you can do, how you can do it. Very different stuff in the markets, right? And in the United States, as you guys know, it's housewives, 37, 45, who knows, maybe older, slightly younger. In India, it's all men largely, right? Because they have credit card access, and it's 75, 80% men. And, so we're just, it's very different demographics in these markets. And what we're seeing, Janine, is that there is a sliver of people who really want to go to this stuff, right? And actually unlock payment for this stuff. And it can vary between, 20 to 30% who are very sticky and paying on the app and all of that stuff. And about 50% who might spend 19 to 25 seconds on the app and are in and out. And the remainder 20% are unfortunately, duped into it by accident and are paying and they'll never return. And I think investors are looking at it and they say, okay, this is good, but what is the recurring base like? What is the lifetime value? The other big question that everyone's working on is what is the AI impact on microdramas? Because I think people are getting a little bit worried about microdrama qualities that are 100% AI related, right? And some of them very frequently now go into the soft porn sort of territory, right? So this flight to quality is becoming important. Obviously, a couple of them still use humans. A couple of them, or a little bit more than a couple of them, are still very premium oriented. And I think it's going to be interesting how that side of the business shakes out.
I mean, I have a lot of opinions on the approach to microdrama and how people are integrating it into the way they think and create. What do you tell the traditional broadcasters, the public broadcasters, the people who actually created that space for premium long form?
Now, look, I think you have to use everyone as I said, human ingenuity made TVB. Human ingenuity made ABS-CBN. So that's going to continue. But I think that valve is. I mean, most people are saying, how do we use production tools to get better at what we can, and how do we use it on an efficiency side? I think it's unfair focused on the creator people and the access people. Actually, AI needs to be focused first on product, technology, and engineering. There's a lot of waste over there. And basically, the joke last year, right? Ask a streaming CTO to build something, he wants to hire 50 more people. So that's where the AI use case is going to happen a lot more, right? To streamline that. Look at ABS-CBN, right? How have they optimized their costs over the last few years? How have they, really done more given, their political circumstances and what they've had to go through? It's been a lot of AI application on the technology side, on the engineering side. And a lot of, whether you're pay TV operators or broadcasters, I think need to do that in a much more disciplined way, because that's been a lot of the secret sauce to the big streamers who are being very, very successful, whether it's Netflix on a global level or Hotstar, which has merged, the Hotstar service with its own service, and ended up with a technology team that was smaller than Hotstar standalone, right? But still doing amazing stuff. Whether it's MTech, who's doing the same now with video, which is profitable. That is the key. And by the way, while you're doing that, you have to make Janine and Patrick still love your product and make the personalization and user base a lot more. So that's number one. Number two, content and the people who create content and the people who produce amazing content are still going to be valued tremendously. But they just have to be better at it now, because they have a lot of competition from some of its AI slop, some of its AI native, but they've got competition, particularly on the entertainment side. I would say more on the scripted entertainment side from different generational tastes. The other big thing is that everyone is streamlining operations, trying to see how to be more efficient, whether at a corporate level or a central level, or do you need to attack Asia with 20 people in every market? What is the best product fit and what is the best operational fit? So there's a lot of tweaking going on that, and that's what's giving this sort of impression and this focus that there's so many changes in the corporate landscape, because I think people have to tweak costs consistently with every macro downturn that happens.
I wonder if I could turn you to the investment cycle itself. You've said in the short term we may be suffering a quite severe advertising downturn, but you've also said in this conversation that you think investment interest in the sector in Asia is quite strong. Where is that money coming from? Is it coming from the tech giants, which are becoming giant investment funds? Is it institutional investors? And where's it going to? Is it going into corporates or is it going into content?
Well, that's a great question and multi-layered on this. It's a couple of things happening, right? First of all, Hong Kong has opened up its stock market, and Hong Kong is thriving at the moment in many ways because there's a lot of investor interest, there's a lot of innovation happening in Hong Kong, and there's a lot of companies trying to list there, right? COL is trying to list there, MNC Digital is trying to list there, and they're all pretty punchy valuations. Let's see how they succeed, but they're both getting pretty close. iQIYI, as you know, Patrick is doing a listing there. So people are trying to get access to equity markets in time for this side, but let's see what happens also with the macro has an impact on that. The second is happening more from, I would say, the VC level and the $2 billion fund level. That anything that people aren't going to invest on things that are pre-tech or project to project, which is sometimes, Janine, what happens at a content production level. It's always people say, oh, it's a project to project to project to project, right? But they will invest in something that has some level of scalability, some level of technology, and great creative impulses. And I think there's a lot of interest, Patrick, in that side of the business, but also anything that's AI powered and has strong locality, either whether it's a microdrama company or a streaming company growing in a big market. So there is money being raised by corporates, and obviously GeoStar has been very successful in India. Unext has raised a couple of rounds in Japan, and there'll be more happening. There's a lot of focus, Patrick, to answer your questions concisely on those two markets, in Japan and India. From a content perspective, from a production perspective, from a microdrama perspective as well around that side. So that's the two markets I would suggest. People are looking at it in Korea, but I would say the valuations are still too high and the balance sheets are still too weak for some of the bigger major companies. It's still winter. I was going to say it's beyond winter. It's glacial. It's snowed over, but there are some really interesting emerging companies that are coming out of Korea, because Korea thrives on hardship, as you guys know. So out of that, there's Utopia, which has come up, which is an AI studio, which is end to end, somewhat of a almost a competitor to the big three, and is doing interesting stuff with the big streamers. Cecilia runs that company, interesting company to showcase at APOS because they've got very good creative people behind that. So there's a lot of interest in the Korean side on the AI and entertainment side. But everything seems to have a tech lens to it, because it doesn't seem to lead with content alone, So, and I think that's the that's the fundamental difference compared to what was happening before.
I'm not seeing one single company that I've spoken to in the last 6 months that's not adopting some level of AI, some of them more than others. But it's an AI integration into an existing business. And I really think the conversation is shifting from an AI fear to an AI embrace. And I'm quite looking forward to that, because it makes people more productive, they can produce more. But one of the things I'm also hearing is that the platforms are so squeezed that people are making more and more films, because at least in the film space, you can actually make your film and put it in a theater. So I'm watching that. I mean, Patrick would know more about this than me, but I do think the platforms have become much more conservative in what they acquire. Although Netflix has now started working with like NHK and Nippon to acquire more.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Netflix is acquiring more, is adopting more TV type content, and the announcement and yeah, no, and Janine Patrick, the announcement that it's doing the ad tier in Indonesia, Thailand, and
Yeah,
Philippines,
yeah.
27 onwards. That's really interesting because they have commissioned quite a few big Cinetrons this year from MD Entertainment and others in Indonesia. So it's they are going into that direction. So look, I agree with you. The platforms are that, but then that's why when you talk to the likes of MD Entertainment and Falcon, they are adopting AI. Some of them have platforms of their own, Janine, to your point, and they're trying to make big screen content, but they are trying to solve for microdrama content, but using trying to figure out how to scale it from on a local basis, make the best local content in that format.
Can I try something with both of you, perhaps? Maybe it sounds flippant when I say it, but it's not meant to be. Yeah, earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal announced that IMAX, the big screen company, has put itself up for sale. I mean, it's already a listed company, but basically they're looking to allow themselves to be bought out. And I wondered, Vivek, given everything you've just said to us, is this company a dinosaur, and therefore unattractive, or is it a very strong niche player and therefore very attractive to investors? Equally, do you see this company as a content company or a technology company? And my kicker to this is who then should acquire it?
I'm not sure if it's a content company. I think it's more of a distribution and tech company. You know what I mean? It's almost like the Roku of the theatrical world, right? So do you know what I mean? And so the key question is there value in that? And I mean, Patrick, you know more than I. I'm not a sort of au fait with its financials and all of that business. But if it has very focused fans that are growing every year around the region, and that come to it for that experience, of course, it has a lot of value, right? But the other question then I would ask as well, if I was investing in IMAX or buying it up, is in the future, particularly in the United States, is IMAX going to be disrupted by things like the Sphere, right? Which has, according to their numbers, which they've said, which is unverified, had an incredible 2-year run because they've just reimagined the whole experience, right? Using AI, using different things. So that's the issue. You know, we'll see. And it's publicly listed. That's the
Yes,
IMAX,
it
right?
is.
Its market cap's around $2 billion. So yeah.
Patrick, what do you think?
I mean, I'm wondering if something crazy left field could happen, whether Netflix could snap it up for $2 billion these days and use it as their platform, or Amazon equally, because neither of them want to commit to theatrical in the conventional way, but IMAX is premium, and therefore, it might fit in their strategy.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. It's interesting. You mentioned Amazon there as well, because they are looking for a theatrical business. According to Andrew Jassy, 2 days ago, Prime Video is now a profitable business. But Netflix is the one I think that I've heard about even a year ago, Patrick. There's most mentioned as well. Amazon obviously had that big hit in theaters, right, with Project Hail Mary. It could be acquired. It's very realistic, and it's good that they're on sale. I'm sure investors are quite happy as well, waiting for a premium on the valuation. But that's an interesting question. Who else could be on sale?
Once APOS ends, what are the three things that you'll be just incredibly happy with? I've done a good job. I'm happy until next year.
I think the three things we would be really, um, sort of be very, very happy about is number one, if we see the entertainment industry at wide in Asia seeing a lot of encouragement, positivity, and hope, not just from what people say on stage, but from the understanding that these technologies that are emerging in their most newest formats. And you got to remember that we're still at the dawn of a lot of these models in AI, particularly the multimodal stuff, that can really help transform their businesses rather than replace their businesses. So I think that's the big thing that we'd really hope for. The second thing I think we really want to see, that we'd be happy, is that we want to sort of inject in a number of markets and a number of stakeholders a level of urgency into what they should be and could be doing over the future, whether that's, as Patrick's saying, with IMAX looking at a public transaction, or transforming their businesses, or really empowering their workforces and their best people with the best tools and the best investment possible. Because I think rather than blind panic or pivoting to microdrama one day and long form another day and a marketing strategy a third day, we want to see a more considered, urgent strategy that prioritizes the employees and really moves forward in that basis. And I don't think, a lot of people have asked me, is consolidation the answer and all that? I don't think that's necessarily the answer, because as you both know, I'm not saying doing deals is easy. Doing deals is hard, and doing that stuff. But that's the really hard part is execution and operations, and really making our plan, come to life. I think that's the really, really important part. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that pans forward.
Well, that's going to be a wrap from us today. Vivek, an executive director at Media Partners Asia. We look forward very much to seeing you in Bali and to hearing more of you, and particularly your presentation, which you still, despite talking for such a nice time today with us, have managed to keep under wraps. Vivek, thank you so much. That's to the point.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.